Chief Revenue Officer at TrueSpace. Go check it out if you haven't heard of it. We are here today for coffee and conversations. Part of my job is I get to meet amazing founders through the years through TrueSpace and also through Rise Collaborative, which is where I met Melanie. And, having conversations with founders on a regular basis always leaves me so inspired. And I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to do that through the years. And so now this lovely podcast has come to fruition so that more people can meet the cool people that I get to talk to on a day in, day out basis. And so I couldn't be more happy to feature a dear friend of mine and someone who blows me away every day. Today, you guys are going to be lucky to hear from Miss Melanie Adams. Welcome, Melanie.
Hello.
It's great to see you. Yeah, that's part of the fun of this series is I get to reconnect with all my friends and have coffee with them. Happy Friday to you.
Yes, cheers.
We were just saying, while it is Friday, I'm having to shake off the exhaustion. So if I'm a little incoherent today, I apologize in the front end. Having a little guy can make you a little sleepy. Well, anyways, welcome everyone. Melanie, love your story. You're such an inspiration. And I always think it's fun to back it on up before we go forward. So let's start back in the day. The question I always ask is first job, current job. So talk to us. What was your first job? And I actually have asked you this before, so I know the answer. So I'm like, oh, I can't wait for them to hear. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, you're going to get sick of hearing my story by now. We've talked a few times and nothing really changes, although a few things have changed since we talked. But my first job was actually at Cold Stone Creamery, which is an ice cream parlor. And, they chop up the ice cream in front of you. And there's a little bit of this showmanship that happens. And I quickly became the manager. I was about 16 years old. And the restaurant or the shop was brand new and they were hiring all these folks and they hired a bunch of my friends. And so it was a lot of fun, but I had some really good experience in leadership. And clearly the manager saw that in me to promote me fairly quickly and give me responsibility for the books and for closing the store and for making ice cream and some of those things. So it was a really good, rewarding experience. And I couldn't stay there that long because I, as a self-proclaimed candy kid, it was a little too much to have candy readily available all the time. So.
Access to all the sugar. That's impressive at such a young age. I'm not surprised that you had that kind of leadership all the way from 16, 17 years old. And how cool to be able to, test it out in a way that's not going to have any huge consequences as you're learning, right? That's such an awesome opportunity that you had. And excitingly, what are you doing now, friend? I love what you're doing now. So tell everyone, what do you do now?
Well, I am running my own safety apparel company, and we make flame-resistant clothing for women. So between age 19, actually, and, really first when I met you in 2019, I spent time at one single natural gas and oil company in Denver. And that's my hometown. I'm very proud to be a Colorado native. We go back a lot of generations, actually. So I'm very proud of that. But I spent a lot of time at that company, 18 years to be exact.
Wow.
Starting at the front desk as the receptionist or the director of first impressions, as my mom used to say.
Rise. Yeah, we called it that rise, if you will.
Right? You are the first person that they see when they walk in the door. And whether they're there for a meeting or an interview, there are still executives at the company today that remember me first as the person that they met when they came in for their interview. So it was great. But I quickly climbed the ladder outside of that and got a ton of experience in the oil company, all different facets of running the business, the operations. I was probably the youngest in the room, which was fine, and probably the only female at the boardroom. And again, I was very comfortable there. But when I got to the field, that was a different story because what I was forced to wear in my flame-resistant clothing was not me. And it didn't make me feel comfortable. It wasn't women's clothing. It was basically menswear that we were, trying to fit into when we went to the field. And so I've had this idea for a really long time. It just takes a little bit of extra, push to actually start a business and actually try something new. I
Yeah.
knew the problem existed. I knew I was, experiencing the problem, and I knew there were millions of women working in an industry. And so it just kind of took me going to Denver Startup Week actually to get the courage to start this
Yeah.
company.
Well, and I'm glad you did, right? And I think that speaks volumes about you never know these small moments and the big impact they're going to have. Because there's so many people out there who are like, oh, I had that idea and I never did it. And now I'm seeing someone else do it, right? There's so many of those opportunities and moments, and thinking about what random thing's going to give me the gumption to actually pull the trigger. And for you, it was Denver Startup Week. And I think that goes back to who you surround yourself with and where you spend time really shapes your reality. And I know anyone who knows me is probably sick of me saying that because I say it all the time, but it's important. And it makes a huge difference in what you end up doing. And so for you, you went to Denver Startup Week in 2019. And why did you, finally have the courage to start this amazing company?
Well, as like you said, people have ideas for businesses all the time. And really getting to the actual starting point is tough. But Denver Startup Week is something that I had known had existed for a long time. Again, the world's largest free entrepreneur event. It is fantastic. I will plug them all day long.
Yeah,
The programming is
absolutely.
great. And it's where I met you and several other, people that are still in my life today. But I saw these people starting these businesses and I thought, you know what? It's time because I have this great idea. I know it's a good idea. I know it's a problem that still isn't being solved by even the largest of companies that are my competitors.
Right.
Maybe I am the person that gets to solve this problem. And so I decided to go for it. And I'm very resourceful. I like to pride myself on that. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to figure it out. I love to learn. I'm very curious. And I think all of those things helped me to just go ahead and say, hey, I don't know anything about clothing besides, my mom making some of our Halloween costumes and my prom dresses. And sewed a little bit, but other than that, I didn't understand how garments were made, how garments are constructed, and then how you get them manufactured. And
Yeah.
so it was definitely something that I said, hey, let's give it a try.
Well, and I think that's a really important part of your story, right? Because I think someone would look at you and this, ultimately a clothing company and think, oh, well, I must have to have a background in fashion or gone to school or done this or done that. And I love it that you're like, nope, just oil and gas. I know the problem and I'm going to figure it out. And I think that is one of the most important parts about starting a business. It's not about being the expert. It's about your willingness to figure it out. And you did that.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. And I think again, surrounding yourself with people that can help and support. I am fortunate to have a mentor. She's kind of a founding advisor. She's been in my life for a really long time. And she was very successful with her clothing line of golf clothes for women back in
yeah.
like the early 80s when nobody was selling women's golf clothes. And she got, she's very successful in that. And so when I approached her and said, hey, I have this idea, she said, let's do it. Let's go for it. And I'll introduce you to this and I'll tell you this and I'll help you along. And that was, again, gave me the confidence to say I was on the right track and I had somebody that could at least start me down the right path of
Yeah.
connecting me with the folks that matter, because the apparel industry, honestly, is actually quite small, especially in Denver. And so I was able to, get connected with the right people to get started. And here we are.
Yeah. And the thing I love about live is you can see if someone comments, and one of our favorite people, Alicia Huck, just commented and said, so cool, irony intended. And that is irony intended.
Love that.
Yes, your story is incredible. And so, yeah, you weren't the expert in fashion. You didn't know how to put these together. But the key point, and I think this is really important, is that social capital. You had the connections and the people, and that to me is way more important than the actual knowledge. You can learn the knowledge. It's the people that are going to really make the difference in your life. And so before we go down that road, I want to back up one more time in the sense of talking about being a woman and being the youngest woman in the room. In what I heard you say is some of it's just kind of who you are, right? And that's great. Oh my God, my computer just died for a minute. Hopefully I'm still here. Some of that's
You
just
are.
who you are, and that's great. But at the same time, too, there's probably a young woman watching and thinking, I don't know, could I do that? And so I'm curious, like, any tips or what gave you the courage or things like that about, like, what does it feel like to be the only woman, the youngest woman in the room?
I didn't really consider it that way at the time,
Sure.
because again, I have self-confidence anyway, and I always felt like I had something to add to the conversation. And you and I have spoken about this before,
Yeah.
but in a room of men, when you're, potentially the youngest, definitely the only female, you're kind of asked to take the notes. Hey, can you just
Yep.
take the notes for the meeting? And I actually used that to my advantage because I knew I took better notes than anybody. I was very organized and I could type. But it also gave me an excuse almost to talk to any one of those men in the room and who were typically, at least my level, but definitely above me. And it gave me an opportunity to circle back with them, whether it was an agenda item question, whether it was some clarity, whether it was some follow up or some sort of action item, whatever that was, it gave me an opportunity to have a relationship with those folks. And
Yeah.
the more that I had relationships, I just got more comfortable in those rooms. They expected me to be there. They were happy that I was there. And so it didn't really feel so bad. And we had several women that were influential in the business, but not necessarily in operations or regulatory, which is where I spent a lot of time. And then again, you get to the fields and you're definitely the only women on the drilling rig or in the gas plant where you are. And some of those things. And again, I felt really comfortable because I knew my stuff, right? I was there to help them. But I wasn't comfortable in the clothing. And that's what sticks with
Yeah.
me. Um, you know, about how I had to manipulate my clothes or how I just felt so out of place more than anything. They didn't treat me that way. It's just the way I felt when I showed up. And I think that was the difference for me. And, I like to say it's this male populated industry. Women are dominating. It's the men that
Yeah.
just populate by the numbers. And we're seeing more and more women entering the industry. And that's something else I have passion. You mentioned it in the little blurb about STEM, trying to attract girls and young women to get into STEM roles. If they don't see themselves in that, and then let alone have to wear men's clothes to the field, that's not getting us anywhere. So I think this helps as well in that space. And I'm very passionate about inspiring girls to get into STEM and some of the trades roles and those things because it's a matter of them excelling in these industries is really important for all of us, really.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think some people would hear it and be like, oh, it's just clothes. Who cares? And what we forget, or they'll be like, oh, that's just about vanity and this and that. But, that's not the case, right? Like how you feel and how you show up, and clothes are a piece of that puzzle. And not that you have to have the fancy designer wear or whatever it is. It's not about vanity. It's about being comfortable. And I'm sure you've experienced that and can speak to that as well.
Flame resistant clothing on its own is considered PPE, right? Personal protective equipment. It is a tool to do your job. And if you don't have the right tool to do your job, you're struggling. And that could be that you have a giant cuff at the bottom of the pant leg. God forbid there was an incident and you had to run. You trip over your pant leg. That's a safety concern, right? And some of those things, when you've got an extra fabric here in the arm, if you're turning wrenches or around moving equipment, those are safety hazards. And so your safety equipment shouldn't become the hazard. And for a long time, it's been this one size fits all approach. Employers are just giving this to their employees and said, here you go. And I would say those days are numbered. I really think that people are starting to advocate for themselves a little bit more, especially a young woman going to the field needs to be able to speak up and say, hey, I need better. And we're providing a solution that is better. So now they can say, this isn't working for me, but here's something that will. And I think that's the piece that have been always missing in my career, is to say, there wasn't anything better. And so now there is
Yeah.
better. And so we can do better.
Yeah. And I love, obviously, we're talking about pretty far down the road where you have a product and it's beautiful and, you're killing it but getting there, I don't want to over glamorize things, right? Because I think when we over glamorize things, then people don't have the courage to do it. And let's be honest, getting a business off the ground, I don't care who you are or what you're doing, is not easy. And even harder, in my opinion, to build a business. But, starting and building are obviously two different endeavors. But share with the audience a little bit about, what was it like starting a clothing company with an oil and gas background and some of
Well,
the challenges,
yeah, and I joke because, I have a master's degree in environmental policy, and I'm worried about zipper covers. And my story about zippers. It is a challenge to find just the right zipper. Of course, it has to have, meet the quality standards that you want to see, as well as the flame resistance and some of those things. But I just kind of felt like I was stumbling on this thing that shouldn't be a thing
right?
when going through it. But one of the things I learned was, well, I learned that I didn't have the right language to direct somebody in apparel development. And so that was one of the things I realized, was that I didn't like the way these clothes were fitting, and I didn't know why. I didn't know how to tell her that it wasn't up to my standard, because I really wanted to come out with something that was high quality, that really fit and flattered.
Yeah.
And it's really the fit and the comfort that we were most focused on. And for some reason, it just wasn't working for me. And so I decided to take a pattern making class. And fortunately, because the universe has my back, there was a pattern making class being taught 5 blocks from my house in Denver, and taught by this woman who is a very experienced pattern making and a technical designer. She had worked in the industry for a long time, studied at FIT, and was a very accomplished professional. And she's teaching this class in Denver. So it was a 14-week pattern making class. And so I took it, and it gave me the opportunity to have the language that I needed to speak, to be able to direct somebody else. But even further, it gave me the skills and the confidence that I could do this myself with her
Yeah.
guidance. And so what I found was that we had an issue with the product, and we had gone to final prototype. We were like literally at the very last thing, and we said, hold on, time out. We have to back all the way up to the pattern. We have to fix the pattern in order to get the shape right, which would make the fit better and would make it more comfortable. And that has been my crux of everything we're doing, is really comfort. And so once I learned that, we had to go back, and the factory was like, hold on, we're at final prototype. How did you really want us to back all the way up to pattern? But they worked great with me. We were able to correct the pattern and come out with a product that we're really, really happy with and very proud of. And now I have the skills to be able to talk about it and to be able to truly understand that garment construction, which is the crux of what makes something fit and be comfortable.
Yeah. And I think
But
there's
like
so
you
many.
said, it's not easy, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And again, I think surrounding yourself with people being curious and willing and eager to learn have definitely been helpful for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that your clarity on your why is so important, right? You knew what your why was. And I think, trying to get something off the ground, not going as fast as you're wanting it, because we're all, I shouldn't say we all, a lot of us are type A go getters that want it to be done like
Mhm.
yesterday. I can say that you and I are, at least. And, having that patience. And I think some people aren't willing to be like, wait a minute, no, 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 I need to back this up and do it right. That takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of confidence. And so I'm curious, like, how was that for you? And how did you have that courage and confidence? And, what kept you going on day, I want to pause before you answer. It's funny. So I think of what you just said in terms of the zipper. I think of that as zipper gate. For context for people. After I shut down Rise, we had a monthly happy hour with some of my Rise members. And gosh, Melanie, when was that? I think it was like February 2021. So 2 or 3 years in to this,
Mhm.
launching this company and really hitting this like huge roadblock of zippers, which is such a random, funny thing that no one would expect, right? Or the layman not in the apparel world would expect that
Mhm.
this crux of what you're trying to do was really getting stopped by a zipper, right? And I just remember you coming into that happy hour and just being crushed. And I hope that's okay that I say that, but just being like so discouraged, disappointed. And, from an outsider looking in, there were moments where I could feel like it felt almost like you were like, should I just quit? Like, did I do all this craziness and now I'm going to get stuck because of zippers and I guess I'll just go get a job, or whatever. Talk about that, because I think that all entrepreneurs that I know have had some kind of zipper gate in their, journey of their company. Obviously not all of them are with zippers.
Zippers, like really. There are like 30,000 zippers in this one company, and they have one flame resistant zipper. And it was back ordered or out of stock or whatever it was, but it was going to delay us even further. And again, I didn't want to settle on quality. I know that these are the best zippers in the world. I know that they have a very low failure rate. When you're talking about workwear, that is an important feature. And we don't often think about those zippers until they fail. Right. And
Right.
so I was grappling with this. I have one option to choose from. I have one color. It doesn't necessarily go with the scheme that I was going with. And it kind of just almost derailed me thinking, is this, should I settle for this? Should I go for that? Because there are options out there, but it's not the best one and it's not this, right? So I got to the point where I was like, all right, let me look at zipper videos. And so I was watching videos on like how zippers are made. Like, can we figure out a way? Yeah, that I figured out. There's a reason that this one company exists and they have a monopoly on zippers. But what it was teaching me was A, patience, and I don't have a lot of that. But B, that it was really something, if I didn't want to settle on the quality, then we were going to have to wait. And we were going to have to figure out what that's going to do to either the cost or the time or the whatever that is. But again, if that was something we wanted to pride ourselves on of quality, then this was kind of a non-negotiable. And I'm still interested in R&D on some zippers. I have some ideas of some things.
Who knows?
And there's a couple of ladies that have been great mentors to me. You know them well as well. And they said to me, you know what, Mel, like Apple just came out with version, and this was probably 12 of their iPhone, right? We're on 15 or something today. They were very happy with V1. You got to come out with V1. Understanding you can improve, you can iterate, you can get better. But and so I was proud of that. And I thought, you know what, we can settle for this color that I wasn't set on and move on and say, listen, we're happy with the product. We're great with the quality. Let's come out with that, understanding this is just V1 and we can always do better in the next version, especially once we get user feedback, especially once we have it kind of tested more in the market. We can continue to iterate as we go, but we're very proud with the V1 that we came out with and the zipper that we chose.
Well, I think there's so many important lessons in there, and it's a nuanced lesson, right? Because I think, you're very clear in your why and you're very clear in the quality, and you're not willing to sacrifice and put just something out for the sake of putting out. But I think sometimes people will then become perfectionists, right? And then that will stop them from progress. So it's such this nuanced thing of being clear about what you are and aren't willing to live with. And what is going to make a difference in your product versus, and so I think it's a really important thing for people to think about. And I think it's because you are very clear on your core values and what you stood for and where there is room to budge and where there isn't.
Definitely. And that is kind of one of those fine lines. We see it in a lot of entrepreneurs, right? They want things to be perfect, or they want things, but that's often what stops us, right? Or the fear that this isn't going to work, or the fear that this, and you see those quotes all the time tossed around. I put it on my Motivation Monday weekly, some sort of something that really reflects what I'm going through. But that you just, you can't let those things stop you. Although, like you said, you've got to be clear on the why and what we were trying to accomplish. And those things really impacted, sure, the time and sure the, end result, but being able to just have that persistence almost, and don't let that kind of fear and negative talk creep in too much. It's going to be there no matter what. But
Yeah.
getting through that, and then once we're proud of that and we get the feedback from our users, that's what really keeps me going. Is anytime I meet a new woman and she tries it on and she just loves it, I'll never forget. There's a gal who she works in Midland, and she's one of the people I was solving this problem for. I have always had her in my mind as a marketing persona, right? She is my field user. She has been working in the oil field for 35 years as a daily user. She put the clothes on and was like, this is the most comfortable thing I've ever worn, and bought 2 outfits on the spot. That was it. That's all she wears now. That made me really proud, right? That made me validated that what we came up with was actually going to change lives, honestly. And like you said, some people think about it as just clothes, but it really is much bigger than that. And so that was a really validating moment for me, when I had her kind of give me that immediate feedback of what we were doing was so great from what she's experienced her whole career.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your story too, in the patience concept, because, I remember being a founder, and, I feel like there's this narrative around fast hyper growth. And one of the things that drew me into True Space and that I'm really proud of to work here is this idea of like, we need to change the narrative, because when you have a zipper gate or some of these other things, and you do have to slow down and be intentional and try to build a business that's predictable, right? You're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do it, right? Because of the narrative and what we're hearing and what this glorified or glamorized startup world that we see. And it's time to change that, right? It's time to understand that, look, it may take quite a while to get your company off the ground, and that's okay. And one of the things I think is important to talk about with you, because you have had so much success. And if somebody just saw you today, they'd be like, damn, I don't know if I could do that. She's so unbelievably impressive. One of the things I love, and I think it's an important story, is that, I think there's this narrative or this pressure that if you're going to do something, you have to go all in. And if you don't go all in, then you must not be that serious, or you must not be that into it. And I can tell you from my experience, I didn't have that luxury. And I think that it was really smart that I didn't just, jump in and had no salary. Because when you have fear, which you're going to have regardless, it takes up a lot of space.
Mhm.
So if you can sort of share with everyone, kind of how you went about it. You didn't just have this idea and be like, I'm going to go start this apparel company, invest all this money, and quit my job and it will be perfect. That wasn't your story. So if you could share a little bit about that journey obviously now you're focused on it full time, but that
Yeah.
wasn't how you started.
And going back, this goes back to Denver Startup Week. I had attended so many sessions, and there were these founders, and one of the guys, I think he was on the panel you were on, really, that was kind of talking about, people have side hustles. A lot of people have side hustles, and starting at that, if you can carve out time to start this, while still being fully employed, while still, contributing to somebody else's company, do it. Because really that pivot between, the startup, real true startup phase to then running the business, there are some uncertainties there, of course, and the timeline is going to extend, and some of those things that a stable job provides. And so you're doing something really scary over here, but you have a stable job. And fortunately, I was working for a company that supported my decision. Honestly, they have been friends of mine for a long time, and they've known I've had this idea for a really, really, really long time. And so they were supportive of what I was doing, partially because the oil companies that I was continuing to work with on my full-time job were going to be my future customers on the other side, and vice versa, right? So that was supportive. But at some point, I was getting stressed out. I was really just stressed out on both sides, right? I was working until 10 p.m. with my, side hustle, and then working in a very high stress. Reading and interpreting regulations and keeping somebody, an oil company, in compliance is tough, especially in Colorado. It's very tough. And so that was too much stress. And so my husband said, well, why don't you just quit your job? And I was like, really? So because he's amazing and supportive of what I'm doing, I did that. And I said, we've got to be able to make this work. and EMBHER deserves my full attention. And so that was basically 2022. So
Yeah.
I
Was
spent
it like
all
a
of last
August of
year
2022 bit?
I spent all of last year 100% focused on EMBHER and not necessarily paying myself, which I'm happy to say that I am able to pay myself some this year. Again, I deserve that. EMBHER deserves my full attention and some of those things, but you don't get there overnight. And that was something I didn't realize.
Right.
And so we've navigated kind of through that. And hopefully this 2024 is a real true growth year for us. And with the traction that we're receiving with some of the additional publicity that we've been getting, which has been great. Will help us to get more people aware of our product, right? We have the great product, we're in the market, and now people just need to know that we exist. And then getting in with some of those larger companies has certainly been a challenge as well, which I knew was going to be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're disrupting a market, there's a huge education piece, and that's, probably a barrier to entry and why a lot of people don't take the leap and do the things you're doing. Talk a little bit about some of those challenges of disrupting a market and what that's been like. Yes, now you have your zipper gate solved. You have a
Mhm.
product. It's a beautiful product. You've now focused on EMBHER full time, and yet there still are understandably challenges because you are disrupting a market. What have some of those been, and how have you overcome them?
I'm currently navigating that right now. And again, having come from the industry and having been somebody in the safety group, I ended up in corporate safety by the time I'd spent 18 years at the oil company. So I was very familiar with most of the purchasing channels and the purchasing decisions and how those things are made, especially at a large company. And so I knew those would be challenges. And that is part of the reason that women don't feel like they have access to these types of things. Even if it did exist in the market today, the access that they're given through their employers is limited. We have
Yeah.
to change that. And I'm willing to put myself out there and have those tough conversations because that's what it is. And so, part of especially for people that don't know, your employer through OSHA is required to provide you with personal protective equipment, whether that's medical
Yeah.
gowns and face masks and, respirators and those things, or firefighting equipment. Your employer provides those for you, but your employer provides probably the minimum. And
Yeah.
hopefully, again, that changes. And so when we're saying, oh, they've been given a catalog to choose from, and our products aren't in that catalog yet, they can't order
Yeah.
our stuff. So now it's us
Totally.
getting into those catalogs and into those distribution channels and ensuring that then those women that want access to our products have access to the products. And when you're
Mhm.
navigating large companies, I understand why they want to manage their spend. They want to manage the vendors that they work with and those things. So that's part of the challenge right now. And I think that's existed for a really long time. But it's time to change, right? And I think outfitting your workers in something that they need and want should be the priority rather than how many vendors do we have in our catalog.
Right.
And so we're navigating that right now as we speak. And again, I'm willing to work with that. As you go up the chain in some of these large organizations, typically the decision maker is going to be a man. Not always. We do see a lot of women in the safety space, which is great. A lot of women engineers and operations, but it's really from the top and the bottom. We have to get the users
Yeah.
excited about it, saying that they want it, and then the decision makers at the top understanding that their people deserve it. And so both of
Yeah.
those are kind of areas that we're targeting to have those tough conversations and make sure that people understand this isn't something that they just want to look good, but really it's a functional piece of equipment and they deserve it.
And I think that's applicable regardless of the industry, right? Breaking into companies, this is the way we've done it always, so this is how we're gonna do it. That's something
Mhm.
that any industry navigates. And I think what I'm hearing you say is being relentless and absolute, problem solving and really thinking about what's in it for them and how to get in and just keep going is what I'm hearing. Do you feel like that's fair?
Definitely, and deliberately, we're different than what's in the market today, right? I mean,
Right.
deliberately, I have chosen things you can't find in other catalogs, you can't find with other suppliers, and we did that very deliberately. Partly because I think what's out there for women, I would say, isn't necessarily professionally appropriate, right? You're not going
Yeah.
to always wear just a men's shirt that's pink. Not going to happen. And you find
Fair.
that in the market, right? It's a traditional button front Oxford shirt. That is a men's product, and it has been for decades, for a century. Men have been wearing that type of garment to the office, and that doesn't work for all women. So we're deliberately not doing that because that's already saturated in the market. Yet we're offering something different that I argue is professionally appropriate for what you would maybe see a female wearing in a non-workwear setting.
Yeah. What advice do you have for founders who want to disrupt an industry? Because it's not an easy feat. I mean, I just am listening to you and I always get so excited and inspired because you have such like confidence and gumption and like sounds so clear in where you're coming from. And not everyone has that, right? Like I think that's something I've always admired about you. And like, God, I wish I had her confidence. And I would imagine there's someone on listening that's going to be like, yeah, that's great, but I don't have that natural confidence. So, what advice do you have to those gals who aren't wired like you necessarily?
It's I think getting really, like you had said, this why part of it, when I am the person that I'm solving the problem for, that makes it easier, right? And so that's where a lot of these businesses are born. You see a pregnant woman, struggling with something throughout her experience, and she invents a new product and starts something, right? Because it's a very intimate problem that you've
Yeah,
experienced.
yeah,
And so don't just like start a business to start a business. And it was funny because I was reflecting on that with my sister. When we were little kids, it was like we wanted to we were on a road trip with my family. And it was like, we wanted a little screen for your window
yeah,
because the sun was
totally.
beaming down on us and we had to put towels in the window. Well, of course that product existed. We thought we invented it. And I always thought, oh, we can come up with we can be, inventors or something. It never came of anything, of course, but
Right.
I never thought I was going to start a business. Never in my wildest dreams. I thought I was going to be a corporate executive at an oil company someday, making changes from within that industry, right? Which I'm very passionate about, the energy industry, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and environment. Again, all of those things I'm still very passionate about. But that's what I thought my trajectory was. Until honestly, it was this problem that I kept facing and
Yeah,
kept thinking that somebody else is going to solve this. Somebody else has got to come up with this. And sure, there's a handful of women's products, like I said, that are based on menswear. Um, but I figured, you know what? It is going to be me that solves this problem. I
yes,
am the person that gets to solve this because I'm the person we're solving it for. And so when you have
yes,
that real intimate knowledge of your problem and you know that there's other people experiencing that, that's what you should do it, right? Be the person that gets to do it because it does take courage, and you could be the one that changes somebody else's life because of you doing that. Again, people have these ideas for a long time. I'm not the first person with this flame resistant clothing for women idea. I'm just one of the first ones to kind of take the leap into tackling the problem.
and tackling it well. I mean, I think that's part of it too. Ideas are great, right? And some people put more value in ideas. Um, I've always disagreed with that. Like an A+ idea is great, but if you have a C or D execution, what's the point? And what I'm
Yeah,
hearing you say over and over is it's not just about the idea, it's also about the execution. And I think that is a missing piece in a lot of companies is that they're just idea folks. And how you execute I'm biased, but I'm a strong believer in how you execute is far more important than the actual idea in and of itself.
definitely. And that's why you see, some businesses fail, honestly, right? I mean, there's some statistic, I hate to even throw it out there because I certainly don't want to be one of them, but like, 50% of new businesses or startups fail.
Right.
And failure is part of, the journey, of course, if you look at some of the things, but I've tried to stay positive in the challenges and just understand that, it's going to be tough. There are going to be things that we come across, and people that don't like the product, can't get the product, whatever it is going to be. but it is about, being resourceful. Like I said earlier, I have a business degree, so that did give me additional experience, I guess, from a school perspective on how to start a business and run a business and understand some financial accounting and some of those things. Um, but otherwise, it's surrounding myself with people that are there to support, there to help navigate certain challenges. That is really important as part of it too, because I'm a solopreneur, right? I use we a lot. We did this and
Yes,
we did
we're
that.
supposed to. I remember when I had to do that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whether it's you or not, it's a we.
yeah, it's great. But like when I talk to other people, we as a company are a we.
Yeah.
But I have done it all, and that's again another way of a challenge, but is something that I'm very proud of, being able to kind of navigate all of that stuff. And as we continue to grow, I mean, obviously we have desires and dreams to add a staff and have some fun people working on some marketing and all of those things. But the way it just kind of shook out is that I was able to accomplish this so far, with the support of a lot of folks.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is great and that we should emphasize is that you've always been able and willing to ask for help and to really put yourself out there. And I think sometimes there's this pressure to always look like you have it all together or that you know what you're doing. And I love that that's not how you show up. And when you're talking about being a solopreneur and I can't help but see Alicia Huck's comment from earlier. I remember Alicia talking to me about being a super doer and while that's great and you obviously are a super doer and you do kind of need to be a super doer to get a company off the ground, but there does come a point, which thankfully Alicia was around at the time. And now I love that I work at TrueSpace for this reason. There does come a time, right, where that super doing, the thing that got you off the ground is not the thing that's going to take you to that next level. And I love that you're already sort of recognizing that, even though you're not quite there yet. And so, yeah, I just think that's so important because for me, it was like, wait a minute, those things that were helping me to be able to be successful are now hindering me. Like that was such a shock and awe for me. But thankfully you're already thinking about it and you're already 2 steps ahead.
Trying to be. Yeah. And it is surrounding yourself with people. I filmed this reality TV show with other entrepreneurs. It will be coming out really soon.
Yes.
And it was just kind of on a whim, right? It was actually, it's a great marketing story is what it is. He put out these Facebook ads and we all clicked on them and got excited about this entrepreneur show. And then you make it through the channels and you get cast on this reality TV show. And one of the things that it provided for me was this community of other entrepreneurs. And that is so important because especially being solo, it's lonely sometimes. You don't have people to talk to. You don't have people that care about it as much as you do. I mean, of course, my husband's been very supportive, but I can only dump so much on him. He doesn't deserve all of that. And so having this strong community of people, and there's people running different businesses that have had different challenges. They've exited companies. That experience from other people is genuinely helpful. And being able to be surrounded by those folks that have done it, been there, done that, maybe failed. And those are as important of experiences to learn from. And so I am very happy to have that group of entrepreneurs to learn from and grow with and bounce ideas. And I certainly want to provide as much back as I can. So when someone says, hey, I have this idea about starting a business, can you talk to me? Absolutely. I'm totally willing to do that because I think that part of it, especially in that idea phase, you can really test somebody, whether they're willing to put in the hard work of the execution, like you were talking about, and whether they just have an idea, but they're not going to be willing to execute or put in the hard work that it's going to take. For somebody that you can tell is really excited about what they've got and really desires to make a thriving business of it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. I can't help but chuckle when you're saying that because I think back to my early days. I had the good fortune of sitting down with Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear, who is unbelievable in so many ways. And she's a Spitfire. And I remember being terrified. And I remember, she asked some tough questions and wasn't easy on me. And I would be a liar if I didn't say I went home and shed a few tears. I've had the good fortune of staying connected with her. And recently we were talking and she said, yeah, I was a little tough on you. I wanted to see if you had it. And I think that is such a good point because, you know, I could have easily been like, Maxine Clark, the most amazing woman in life, doesn't believe in me, doesn't think I can do it. I'm just going to give up. Where instead I had my moment, I had my tears, and then I picked myself back up and I kept going. And I think that is such an important message that you have. And going back to that reality show you did, I definitely want to talk about that. But one thing I do want to hit on a little bit is that, yes, you are a solopreneur, and yes, it is lonely being one, but it's just as lonely. And I think it's important to touch on when you have a team. So a mistake I made early days is that, once I got a team, I was like, great, we can all be in it together and all share in it together. And just like parenting, it's not the most appropriate to tell your child every single last detail and involve them in some of the chaos of parenting. And that was a tough learning for me. And so I think those communities are so important regardless of a team of 20 or a team of one. But anywho, I'll get off my soapbox. Reality TV show. Yeah. So this opportunity came, and I know that people around you were kind of like, what are you doing? Are you sure you want to do that? And I love that you leaned in, because there's so many times when you're an entrepreneur, people are like, what's going on? That's silly, So talk a little bit about that. And then I should probably wrap it up, but I'm like, God, I could talk to Melanie all day long.
I know. I was like, wow, is it already time? Yeah. So again, it was, a Facebook ad that I clicked on and responded to. The TV show is called The Blocks, and it is self-proclaimed as the best show in the world on entrepreneurship. And it's part boot camp, accelerator, reality TV competition, all in one. And I was like, yes. I think something like 60,000 people have applied to this show. I was on season 10, which will be coming out, I think, this weekend, honestly. And so they have a native app as well as Facebook, and then it streams on Prime Video a few seasons behind, but that will be available at some point. But anyway, it was 70 businesses of all different sorts, like a food truck and a jewelry and somebody that builds like automated robotics, like really diverse group of people, right? And then I'm like, well, I make flame resistant clothing for women. And they're like, why? Like nobody got it. And some people that did were like, oh, I've got a friend. Oh, I can connect you. Oh, I used to work in the industry. Like the world is small. But anyway, so you go through this week-long kind of boot camp, and the education piece of it was extremely important. And there were topics like pay-per-click advertising, what's your strategy from your funnel. There's a lot of different education pieces. And then it turns into a competition where you have to pitch your, pay-per-click advertising strategy that you just learned. So there's some fun kind of game part of it that was helpful, but really, again, the immersion with these other entrepreneurs is invaluable, and they have built something really, really awesome in this ecosystem that he's built. And I'm just so thrilled to have been a part of it. It was a life-changing week. Everyone that goes on the block says that. And now I'm connected to all of the other season alumni. And so we have even a greater group of people that are there to help and support and be champions for each other. And it's just been, so it'll be fun to relive the week, because, they film a lot of content. What actually gets, and that was something I had learned, kind of this behind the scenes of how reality TV even works. And none of it's scripted by any means. And so it'll be really fun to see the final product and kind of relive that really fun week.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. Sounds like it might be coming out this weekend. And again, if somebody wants to watch that, where do they go and how will we know?
So yes, it's Beta Blocks on Facebook. And if you just search for Beta Blocks, all one word, it should pop up. And they have a website. They have a native app that you can download, and they'll stream all the stuff, or they post the episodes onto Facebook. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, any good podcast has a signature question. And of course, ChatGPT helped me with mine, as well as Sarah Blakely inspired it. With it being coffee conversations, if you were to write a message on a coffee cup that every aspiring leader would read every morning, what would it say, friend?
We've alluded to this already. I think kind of used all the words so far, but it really comes out again of that Denver Startup Week, and it's take the leap and trust that the universe will catch you. And so I
Ugh,
actually was going to write it on my mug, but even just take the leap. Take the leap,
yes.
because that could go for anything, right? Whether that's going for a promotion, whether that's asking for a raise, whether that's, you know, jumping into a new business, jumping into a new industry, you know, starting a side hustle, whatever that is, like taking that leap, and really trusting that the universe has your back. You'd be really surprised how that support comes in, and I'm just thrilled that I was able to go for it and take the leap. And you know, the universe has my back in a lot of ways, and I'm just, you know, continuously, you know, working hard at making this a success. So
Ugh.
thanks for asking that, because it did give me a second to pause and remind myself that, you know, that is an important thing, is just really that first leap into the unknown.
Well, and that's why it needs to be in a coffee cup, because even though you can say it and you're confident, we all have those moments where we have to be reminded. And I think that is very, very important. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this coffee conversations, because anytime I talk to impressive women like yourself, I just walk away so energized, so inspired, and ready to conquer the world. And I hope someone else out there hears your story and feels the same way. And, you know, I took the leap and launched this, and I would be a liar if I didn't say I cringe a little bit, like, oh my God, I'm just going to pretend like I'm not doing this because it's a little embarrassing right now. But I, that's
So
just me
far,
being
so
hard.
good.
That's just me being hard on myself. But my point is that it's just about starting, and, you know, and getting to have people like you in my life and have these conversations. I know that you keep me going in ways that you don't realize. And I'm just very thankful. And I appreciate you
Right
coming
back
on
at you.
my show. And for those of you, follow her on LinkedIn, Melanie Adams, and your company, EMBHER. Tell them where they can find you, because I know that people should follow along. And I love that on LinkedIn you do Monday inspiration, and I see it and I need it, girl. So keep that up.
Yeah, you know, that started during COVID, honestly, and it just was something that I decided to do, and I get a lot of feedback from it, and a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, where did you find those quotes?" And, you know, it really just is an inspiration from where I'm feeling that week, that day.
Yep.
And yeah, but so at EMBHER, EMBHER, FRC is our channels. And you know, I am committed to doing a bit more of consistent socials in this year. That is
Okay.
something that I want to get a little bit more consistent with. So the more followers might help me, you know, take the leap into that part of the world that I've been somewhat avoiding.
Trust me, I feel you. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you tune in next week, every Friday at 11 a.m. Not Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, 12 Central. We'll be here interviewing amazing women. I hope you enjoyed Melanie as much as I did. Thanks so much, everyone.